of John chapter 12. Gospel of John chapter 12. And last in the previous message, I was in verse 1, where it says, "Then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, who had been dead." And in the previous message, what I was referring to was the 6 days before the Passover, and how I could give a little bit of a count forward to be able to get an approximation with regards to when Jesus was crucified and when he rose from the dead, that sort of thing. So that's where I was before. But moving on into verse 2. In verse 2, it says that he went to Bethany, and there they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with him. All right, so this is where I'd like to start in this message, is when they sit down and they have dinner together. Martha put stuff together for them, and Jesus was at the table with Lazarus and probably a few other people. Now, you have to wonder, or at least I have to wonder. I suppose I don't have to, but I do anyway. I wonder, what was this conversation? What was it like? What was this about? Martha's over there preparing dinner. Okay, so she's taking care of dinner. Mary's going to do something else. So while Jesus and Lazarus are there, sitting at the table, what do you suppose they would be talking about? Consider the fact that Jesus resurrected Lazarus from the dead a little while earlier, maybe a few weeks or so, a couple months, few months. All right, and some time has passed since Lazarus was resurrected from the dead. Jesus comes back to town, comes back to visit with him, and so there they are. They're sitting there talking. This definitely would be a topic of conversation. I would expect them to have a conversation that included Lazarus being resurrected. And I can see wonderful opportunities for humor here. Lazarus, for example, he could say something like, "Well, Jesus, I died already. I went. That was awful. I was sick, and I died. And that happens. That happens a lot. That's not strange. That's not unusual. This is a normal experience for people to have. They get sick and they die. All right? Nothing strange about this. And Jesus resurrected Lazarus. So that means that Lazarus is going to have to go through this again. He's going to go through this again. He's going to go through death again. We don't know exactly how there might be something in the historical record I'm not aware of at the moment, but we don't know necessarily. I don't know right now how he died. Just how did this happen? But it's going to happen. He's going to go through this again. And so Lazarus could have an opportunity to, issue a little bit of a complaint maybe. Say, Jesus, I went through this already, and now I'm going to have to go through this again. Again. I'm going to go through this again. So what's this going to be like? Really? Why couldn't you have just let me go to heaven right then and there, and then Jesus could explain, well, there's some other things that are going on. The situation is a little bit bigger than just you. So, so he did that, and now Lazarus is going to have to deal with it. And pretty soon, Jesus is going to die. He's going to leave Lazarus on his own. What's that? What is that going to be? What is that going to look like? Another part of this conversation might include something like, "So, Lazarus, how you been? Since I left town, and he was out out of town, and he came back for the Passover. I'm sure that one of the questions that he might ask Lazarus is, so how you been? What have you been doing? Right? Now there is some pressure that could be associated with this kind of a question, because Jesus resurrected Lazarus from the dead. He gave him an opportunity to continue living in this world, right? Gave him an opportunity to do that. So, what you been doing? How did you use this time? How did you use this opportunity? Right? Come on, what you been doing? Have you been telling people about me? I'm sure that you've had a lot of conversations like that. And what have you been telling them? What have you been doing with your own time? What have you been discovering about the world that I made? What have you been discovering about your God? Have you been giving any thought to that at all? Any thought? Have you taken any time out of the last few months or so to at least just think about what does God think about what's going on in this part of the world that I'm able to see right now? What does he think about this? What does he see? What does he know? What is he doing? Is there something he's doing that maybe I could be a part of? Maybe I could help? I could be involved with? Right? And if not, then maybe I could go do something on my own. Is this something that God could make use of? Or is this an opportunity for people to be encouraged to get to know him better? What have you been doing, Lazarus? And this is a big question. I have encountered a lot of people who have experienced the miracles of God. They've experienced a miracle of God in their own personal life, where they may have experienced a profound healing, as an example like this. And in my early years in Christ, I kind of made the assumption, well, gosh, if you experience that, well, then, you're going to be devoted, you're going to be committed. This is going to be an important part of your life, to know the Lord yourself, to be an active part of what he's doing, and that your life is going to be a reflection of this second chance, of this new opportunity that you're going to notice, that you're going to see a difference. But this doesn't always happen. It was just an assumption that I made. And for those people who didn't do that to my satisfaction, whatever that might look like, there is no opportunity for me to be condemning towards them. I never was, I never was. And I just thought that it was a little bit different than what I expected. Well, so what? Big deal. That doesn't mean that we can't, be involved in other things. They can't be doing other things. This is good, whatever it is. It's just an initial thought, an initial expectation that, all right, well, maybe there would be something unique, really unique, really profound. And that's not necessarily the case. One of the things that I've noticed is that some people will kind of take the posture of, well, God has performed a miracle in my life, and he hasn't performed a miracle in your life, so I'm good with God. And you, well, maybe, but it doesn't matter what happens with you. It doesn't matter what's going on with you. It doesn't matter what you may know about the Lord that I don't. None of that really matters, because this miracle took place, and so that validates my existence. And sometimes people will then just use that as a way of saying, I can just go out and indulge my flesh and pretty much ignore the Lord, because he's given me his stamp of approval that I'm going to go to heaven with, kind of thing. This happens, Sometimes it can be increased to the point of personal pride, and that can get in the way of the additional things that they could experience and learn and know in their lives. And well, that's just on them, that's just their thing. It doesn't always happen, but in my experience, a miracle of healing, even something as profound as keeping someone from experiencing certain death, does not necessarily translate into this is now going to be a unique form of life per se. We would, again, which is okay. It's not our place to be passing judgment or to be evaluating a person of this nature. But this assumption that people will tend to make, I think, needs to be corrected in many cases. With myself, it needed to be corrected. That's all. I needed to be corrected. I needed to have a bigger understanding of the way things can really be, which is good. That's a good thing. So Lazarus may have been resurrected from the dead, but how would that have really changed his life? We don't have that information. We don't really know. However, I'm venturing to say that as Jesus was having this conversation with him, he might have felt a little bit of pressure. A little bit of pressure. To the extent of, to what degree are you accountable for what you have experienced? To what degree are you accountable for that? What do you have to report? What are you going to tell Jesus? What are you going to say? About how your life was different because of what he did. How did that have a profound impact on you as a person? Do you have any testimony for that at all? It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be profound. It doesn't need to be something that is necessarily worthy of you going on the speaking circuit for. That's not what I mean. But is there anything? Can you at least say something? And that, I think, would be of importance in this kind of a conversation. Otherwise, what's the conversation going to be? What's it going to be about? All right. Well, they could have just been talking about Jesus. That's fine. There's a lot to talk about there, right? We have something new that's happened. Jesus resurrected Lazarus from the dead. He did something that made him look good. We can't. The leadership in Jerusalem went bananas over this, right? They went nuts. They went crazy in that sense. They did not like the fact that Jesus, way over there, he did something. He did something, and well, he looks good because of that. And by default, in this prideful mechanism that people try to embrace for themselves, they look bad. They look bad, and they're concerned about the consequences related to what Jesus did. And so they decide that they need to find some way to seize him and murder him. All right? That's their solution. We are going to do something about Jesus. We are going to be murderers. That's what we're going to do. Yeah. All right. Good for you. Good for you, right? Okay, so Lazarus could be having this conversation with Jesus in that sense of, well, now, Jesus, you did this, and there are a lot of people who are not happy about what you did. I didn't ask you to do this. It's not my fault, right? I mean, you did this on your own, so you did this, and, well, now there are people who are after you. They've made it known that they want to know where you are so that they can seize you. They can take you. And it appears that they are determined to figure out some way to have you put to death. That you're going to die. We're going to kill you because of this, because you made us look bad. All right, that's what you get. Because we are powerful. Whatever, right? So Lazarus could be asking him, so how do you feel about this? I mean, what do you think about this? You resurrected me, and now they're after you. All right. Well, they've already been after him in a sense already, but now they're going to step it up. Now it's a little bit more serious. And here you are, and you're going to go to the Passover. You're going to Jerusalem. All right, they obviously know you are here. They would definitely know that you are here, and I'll explain that more in the following verses, that there's evidence for that. But Jesus, what are you thinking, right? I mean, what are you really thinking here? Don't you realize that you are putting your life in danger? You are at risk. You should flee, because they are going to arrest you, seize you, and if they can find some way to murder you, they're going to do that. And Jesus effectively would communicate, you would expect this to be communicated at the table. Yeah, well, this is what I am going to do. Jesus would say, I will do what God has told me to do. That's what I'm going to do. All right? And if there are these people over here who are in these leadership positions who say they're going to seize me, so be it. So be it. If they're going to murder me, so be it. I guess that means it is time to die. Because I'm going to do what God told me to do. Now, if you think that God told you to seize Jesus, that's the kind of conversation that could take place. If God told these leaders to seize Jesus and to get in the way, to interfere with Jesus doing the work that God has told him to do, well, they better not succeed. All right? That's what Jesus could say. He could say, for their sake, they had better not be successful. Why? Because now, if they succeed with their crime, okay, if they do, well, then how is that going to look between them and God? What is that conversation going to be like when they have this conversation with God at a later date? What's that conversation going to look like? All right? That God told Jesus to go and do something, to go to Jerusalem, and they got in the way, right? God told him to do a certain work, and they interfered. They found a way using their authority, using their power, whatever. If they succeed, well, they're going to have a conversation with God about this. And what's that going to look like? Right? That's not going to look so good. It's just not going to look so good at all. All right? So Jesus could tell Lazarus, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Jerusalem. And if they seize me, they seize me. So they seize me. All right? They're gonna take my life away. They're gonna take time out of my life. They will steal. That's what they're going to do. They're thieves. They steal time out of my life by arresting me and making me be here, wherever that may be. That's what they're going to do. Well, there are two ways to go with this. One, they murder me. All right. So if they find a way to succeed in murdering me, well, now they're a murderer. Okay, so they're a thief, and then they're a murderer. Good for them. They win. What do they win? They win that they have successfully stolen life from God. They won. Congratulations. Good for you. They succeed at murdering Jesus. Congratulations. Good for you. You did it. And you got away with it. Obviously, you're not being punished for it. Congratulations. You win. Good for you, right? Well, if they're not paying attention to reality. They're not paying attention to the truth. The day is coming. It's only a matter of time. The day is coming when there will be judgment for that. There is going to be an experience between them and the Lord concerning this issue. Is that how they want to relate to their God? Is that what they want to have when they go before him? That's what they want. They're a bunch of thieves and a bunch of murderers. Okay? And so this is what Jesus is effectively going to be able to say to Lazarus. Well, I'm going to do what God told me to do. That's my testimony. And if they seize me, well, if they win, they're going to lose. If they murder me, they win, but they lose. Okay? Winning isn't always everything. If you win, you could lose bad, really bad, worse than if you just would have just walked away and not played, don't play the game. So, this could very well be the conversation that Jesus would have with Lazarus and the other folks at this table. If they seize him and then they release him, well, now what is that going to look like, right? They seized him, they released him, and now he's a walking, living testimony of their evil, all right? That they seized him to begin with. Who do they think they are to seize him to begin with anyway? To get in his way, to stop him from doing his work. Who are these people, right? And when they release him, when they do, because that's what you would expect. That's not how it worked out, but if it did, well, then they have done something. They achieved their victory, all right? But the consequences of what happens next is going to make them worse, make them look worse, make them be worse. They're a worse person than who they were before. All right? This could very well be the conversation. Knowing the pride and the determination of these religious leaders, the people at the table would say, well, I think they're going to succeed. So you're going to die, and Jesus would say, yeah, well, then I die. And then I know what's going to happen next. All right? People like this, they don't think far enough ahead. All right? They just don't think about, well, what are going to be the consequences of our decisions? They won't, who cares, this is our decision. We're going to do this. And regardless of, whatever the consequences are, then we will figure out what to do from there. And it will be another one of those, this is what we command, good for you, right? You win. So Jesus is going to go into Jerusalem and he's going to die. The probability of this is quite high, all right? It's a high probability. So they're going to have this meal together with the understanding that this is it. Now Jesus is going to die. And if that happens, well, who's going to resurrect people from the dead anymore, right? That's going to be a potential opportunity for new conversation. So what happens? Verse 3. Moving to verse 3. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of oil. All right, now Judas had something to say about this. I'm going to move forward and go to verse 7, and then I'll come back to verse 4 in a little bit. In verse 7, Jesus said, "Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always." All right, so she kept this for the day of his burial. Maybe she anticipated this. She expected that this is something that's going to happen in the future, and so she made a decision that this is what she's going to do. All right, and we don't know when that decision was made. It could have been made 2 or 3 years prior, possibly. We don't know, but there is an opportunity for it to be that long, that she may have acquired this over a period of time. She may have already had it. Looking at the valuation of it that Judas gives it in the previous verses, which I'll go to in just a moment, this was about the equivalent of 1 year's worth of labor. If you work 6 days a week and you obtain one denarii per day, it's a reasonable wage, then you're looking at a year's worth of labor that's associated with here. That's a lot, and she could have, we don't know how she could have acquired that. We don't know. There are many ways she could have acquired it. We don't know how she did acquire it. Let me say it that way. There are many ways that she could have gotten it. She could have saved it. She could have inherited it from somebody. There was a lot of potential. She could have made it. She could very well have made it. But however she got it, this was something that she decided to do with what she had. All right? This was hers. It was hers. It belonged to her. And she should be recognized as the owner of this. All right? Of this oil, of this perfume. It's hers. And this should be honored. This should be respected. All right? And whatever she wants to do with it should be her decision. Her decision. If that legitimately belongs to her, then she should be allowed to do whatever she wants, and nobody should assert any claim over her property. Now, what Judas does is he says, this could have been used for a greater purpose. Well, maybe so. But it's still hers, and it's her decision what to do with it. She should not be condemned or anything of that nature compared with, because she decided to do something with her own property. Okay? I mean, it's reasonable to bring it up that there were perhaps other options. But in the end, whatever she does with it must be respected. So she decides to use it in this way. And it was on her hair, it was on Jesus' feet, and this is a perfume and it's oil, and chances are, this is going to last a long time. All right? I mean, it might still be giving off an aroma or a scent. It might still be doing that after Jesus is put in the grave, or after he resurrects with his physical body. Could very well have lasted a week, I mean, reasonable. So what she has done with this is she has established a unique connection between herself and Jesus, because the oil is on her and it's on him, and that smell is not going to go away. You better like that particular smell. Okay? And that's not going to go away. And this is going to be received by the mind, which is going to stir up emotions. And this is going to result in an intellectual and an emotional connection with Jesus. All right? That's what it's going to do. That this is going to establish a personal connection between Mary and Jesus, just between the two of them, through the scent of the perfume. And that's a nice thing, isn't it? Isn't that a nice thing? That she does this for his burial, in the sense that he's going to die. But, even in his death, this is Mary's way of still kind of being connected with him, someone who is really important to her for as long as that scent may remain. And in using that much, that's going to be a big smell, okay? And that's going to go for a long time. I could tell you all kinds of unique stories that I've had in my life, from guys wearing cologne to a skunk that was in my yard. I mean, lots of interesting stories that I could tell that would be comparative with this, in a sense. But this scent is going to be something that Mary and Jesus are going to have between each other, all right? And in using a whole year's labor's worth of this, I just wanted to spend some time to explain what this is going to do, and how this is going to be a certain kind of bond between Mary and Jesus exclusively, all right? Okay, going back up to verse 4. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who would betray him, said, "Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? Why wasn't this done? You guys, explain this to me. You give me an explanation for this. I say that this could have happened, so now you are required to satisfy my my whatever, right? Okay, and Jesus says, just leave her alone. Okay, but that's what he says, and he could be right? It could have been sold. It could have been given to the poor. All right, well, that's a possibility. Sure. Verse 6. This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the money box, and he used to take what was put in it. All right, so he was the treasurer, and it turns out he was a thief. The money was not used for the purpose that it was given for. So, it's stolen. That's the definition, Now, he could have said all kinds of possible things that could maybe justify it in his mind, that it was acceptable for him to take that. And, I've encountered a lot of thieves, and I understand the psychology of thieves and other criminals of that nature. And I'll tell you, of the many ones that I have known, I can't think of one of them so far. Not yet. I have not really found one so far who did not find a way to say it was okay for them to engage in theft. They found some way, They found some idea, some thought to say that it was owed to them, or it was obtained immorally anyway. There's always some reason. And then they go to prison. That's normal, all right? Or maybe they don't. But my point is that I've not yet encountered anyone who has stolen something with the direct intent of saying, this is evil. Well, no, I take that back. As I'm thinking about it, I can think of one. This is evil, and I'm going to do it because it's bad, because it's wrong. And that's what I'm going to... No, I take that back, as I remember that person did have a reason still, even though they knew it was wrong, they said it was wrong, they still had a reason, and they said, well, but this is what's going to make it right. This is what's going to make it okay. And it was still wrong. But all right, my point is that if Judas was in fact using the money for reasons that it was not given for, then you have a legitimate thief on your hands. All right, and well, maybe the disciples knew that. And they allowed, maybe Jesus knew that, and they allowed for that. They felt, well, what's happening with it, the cost of it, we understand that Judas might still be the best person to be handling the money, so, we'll just call that the banking fee, I guess, something like that. And they would allow for that. Or it could be, it's possible that John was wrong about this. Maybe he wasn't stealing. It says that he was. And so I will rest with that and say that, it says this is what John recorded, that he was stealing from the treasury. And so on that basis, we have to consider that the highest probability is this is correct. All right? But there is a small, from my opinion, it's just my opinion, there's a small possibility that maybe John was not right about this. How would he know? How would he know? There are many ways he could have known, but we don't have, I don't think we have enough to go on to say that was really, that was necessarily happening. I don't think we have enough to go on besides just this accusation. So for myself, I rest with, okay, he stole the money, fine, all right. But one day, I'm still going to ask John, and I'm going to ask around. I'm going to ask around and say, was that really happening? I just curious. Is that something that he really did, or was this just what John believed? What John's conviction was. I will ask this question later. And if it turns out that Judas was stealing from the treasury, then, fine. I'm not going to feel awkward about it at all. Okay, good. Fine. But that's of course a long time ago, and that obviously didn't get in the way of what Jesus needed to do. didn't stop him from doing the work that God sent him to do. So, we can move forward with that and just, live life with the understanding that that's what we have, okay? Now, he says that this could have been given to the poor, all right? And John says he didn't care about the poor anyway. But let's consider the possibility that maybe it could have been given to the poor, all right? Now, if Judas didn't care, then so what, right? It still goes to the poor. Fine. It still goes to what the people who were making the decisions decided that it would go for. All right? So if that was given to the poor, then how is that necessarily going to help the poor? In what way will that really help the poor? Sometimes, I would say often, more than sometimes, most times. Okay, most times, if you give something to someone who is poor, then you are not, you might help them for a moment, but you're not necessarily going to help them for the long term. All right? And so you need to think about what really is the help. Is it a short-term momentary help? And if you understand that, if you're okay with that, that's fine. Or is it something that's going to help them for the longer term? If you help the poor and they embrace that for the shorter term, then they may not make good decisions with that help that could affect them for the long term. This is a risk. For example, if you were to give someone a day's wage, all right, or let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's say you give someone 10 days' wages, whatever that would be, the equivalent of what they could earn with 10 days' worth of labor. If you give them that, well, then what do they do for those 10 days? Maybe they do nothing. They don't do anything. And they just spend what they had. 10 days later, they are now just as poor as they were 10 days before. They're in the same situation. What did you really solve? Right? You help somebody temporarily, but they're still in the same situation. Now, if they would have done something in those 10 days that would improve their circumstances, well, that is different, right? Let's say that in 10 days, they learned how to do something new. That was something that they could use to trade as labor. All right? If they learned something new, if they learned how to do something new, and 10 days later, they started doing it, okay, you provided them with the capital resources so that they could use their time in order to increase their skills, increase their skill set, and now they can use their new knowledge, their new understanding, their new skills, they can use that in order to improve their life, and this can be a good thing, all right? So giving to the poor, it can have a negative consequence because they do nothing with what it is you gave them, and they end up in the same situation that they were in before. That would be a worse situation because they will have lost 10 days of their life. All right? They would have lost 10 days of their life, and you're the one who paid for it. Okay? You paid for it. You gave them away to do nothing for 10 days. So you didn't really help them. Instead, you help them not do something for themselves and also for others. All right? So helping the poor needs to be better defined. And if you want to help someone so they do nothing for 10 days and we have an understanding that that's what it is, then fine. Okay, maybe they need a break. Maybe they need to rest. And so give them a 10-day vacation. All right, then maybe they can be more productive after that. That's another way to look at it. It really depends on the scenario. But that's the point, is that it really depends on the scenario. And sometimes you might help the poor, and sometimes you may not be helping the poor. All right, now just because they're poor, that doesn't necessarily mean that they need help anyway. All right, so they're poor. All right, what's the big deal? Okay? Now, I am relatively old now, and I mean, I've lived many decades. And at the current date, when I'm doing this recording, I can still say that the majority of my years of being alive, of living, still the greater majority of my years have been spent in poverty. All right, very poor. There were many times when I was homeless. And some of those times were because of my bad decisions. Other times it was just the consequence of somebody else's bad decision. I know what it's like to go hungry for many days. I know what that is. I know what it is to have a waistline that definitely demonstrates that I've got malnutrition. I know what that's like. I know what it is to live that way. I know what it is to be in this world and not have good skills. Not have good marketable skills, not good enough in order to take care of myself very well. Most of my life has been a real struggle. All right? I mean, just a real struggle every day. How am I going to make it to the next day? How am I going to make it to the next week? How am I going to make it to the next month? And most of the time I could never see vision. I could never have any vision beyond 4 to 6 months. Just no way of even being able to plan anything because of extreme volatility in life. All right? But you know what? During those years, especially after I came to know the Lord, okay, some of those years before I came to know the Lord, but definitely those after I came to know the Lord, when I got saved, in the midst of being in poverty, in the midst of many times having nothing but what I could carry, literally, all right, that was my life for several years, just what I could carry, and that that kind of a life can be hard on a person, but in the midst of all of the physical strain and stress and challenges of how am I going to make it, how am I going to do this, how am I going to be an honorable person, How am I going to become a contributing member of society? How am I going to have a place to be myself? How am I going to have some place that I can call my own, where I have a legitimate right to be here, kind of thing? And how am I going to eat? And how am I going to eat better? All right? What is that going to look like? In the midst of all of those struggles of poverty, I had a peace in my heart because I had my God with me and I knew him, and so from the point in my life when I got saved and forward, that was different from my life before. And in my life forward, well, now I'm going to be poor, but I'm going to be poor with peace in my heart and peace with my God. And I'll tell you, that the life of the poor can be filled with great happiness, can be filled with great joy. All right? I know this. I've done this. I've been there. I bought the t-shirt, to use that expression. And so being poor is not necessarily a bad thing. All right? If I'm doing okay these days. I'm doing pretty well. I have young children that I'm taking care of, and I have other obligations that I'm meeting just fine. And I may end the month with nothing left, but hey, I'm doing pretty good. Right now I'm able to do this recording. I'm doing this recording in my home. I'm doing that. Where you're watching this probably in your home, and I'm here in my home, and I'm able to do this. I have space to do this in. This is the best my life has ever been, comparatively speaking, without question, the best. But if things are different a year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, and I go back to the poverty that I had before, I won't feel that that's a form of failure at all. I won't feel like that's a problem that has to be solved. I won't feel that way. I know that. I know that there can be great peace, happiness, and joy regardless of what you have where you are, what you eat, whether you're able to manage your temperature pretty well, hot and cold. Do you have a heater? Do you have an air conditioner? I understand these things, whether you have electricity or not. Okay, I understand these things already so well that I can testify personally that being poor is not necessarily a problem that needs to be solved. All right? It's just not. And so while Judas might say that this could be given to the poor, well, there could be some nobility for that, and I don't want to take that away. All right? But what I do want to say is that this is not necessarily a problem that has to be addressed. And with that kind of a background, all right, with that kind of a testimony and explanation, I'm hoping that you can appreciate what Jesus says next. All right, so I got to go back to what he says next. In chapter 12, verse 7. Going back to verse 7. But Jesus said, let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. That's hers. She's kept it for this moment. I'm telling you, this is it. I'm going to go die. So she is responding to that, and she's saying, well, I guess this is my chance. Let's break out the box of oil. Let's do it. And then he says in verse 8, for the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always. All right, so Mary is not going to have Jesus always in the same way. So she has decided that this is what she's going to do. And in this way, she's going to hang on to him a little bit longer, as long as that scent is still present. From her perspective, he is with her. She is connected to him. All right, so they're not going to have him always. This is what she is doing to feel, some sense of connection that will last a little bit longer. What are you guys doing? Nothing. Complaining. Talking about the poor, all right? But the poor you have with you always. The poor there will always be poverty. And like I said, it's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I have known many very wealthy people who are definitely unhappy. They have homes, huge, enormous homes that they dwell in that are empty. Their lives are empty. And even though they may be well contained, and they have the energy, the fuel to be able to manage the temperature of this place, and they have lots of stuff. They have the car they want. They go on their vacations. They do whatever, right? They have their clothing. They have their appearance. Good for them, right? But really, they have nothing. And it's depressing. It is. It's depressing. I have known some wealthy people that are very pleasant to be around, and I enjoy them. But I've known much more wealthy people who are very unpleasant to be around because they are just simply dead inside. They are not really alive. They're just not. And it's depressing. So you have the poor with you always. Fine. Okay? You do. And those who are poor, they can be wonderful people, filled with life, filled with joy and happiness. And they may struggle in their days, but they live well, all right? They live well. And what they value, they value. And what they have, they value. And it can be a very good quality of life, much better than those who are not so poor. I'm serious. I know this might sound a little awkward, and you're probably thinking, yeah, well, I'll still prefer not. But, yeah, fine, okay. But to have the poor with you always, Jesus is saying, look, your concern just isn't that important. All right? That's effectively what he says. Your concern for the poor is not as important as you think it is. It just isn't really the priority here. It isn't that which is of greater importance. And so let her do what she wants with her own stuff. You can do what you want with your own stuff. You could do that. But Jesus, asserts the fact that, look, this is always going to exist, and it's okay. We don't need to try to find a way to fix this kind of a problem. If a person does not want to be so poor, they can do something about it. All right? They can do something. And in just about every case, they can work, or they can learn how to do something different. That's something that I did. The day came when I realized that, if I want my life to be better, if I want to be able to take better care of the people who depend on me, if I want to do more in my life, do things that I want to do in the future, then I'm going to have to learn how to do more things for people and to do things that are of greater value. And the way of doing that is quite simple. You have to have education. You have to learn new skills. And these things you learn, these things are going to be hard. You have to do things that are hard, all right? And when you do things that are hard, well, there are other people who won't. And so you enter into a different class of people, those people who can do things that are hard, that require a lot of education maybe, that require a lot of practice. You have to learn how to do things that other people are just not going to take the time and the effort to do. And when you do that, then you become a member of a different group of people, of being able to do things that other people can't do. When you can do things that other people can't do, then you have less competition, and with less competition, because of the value of these things, then you can obtain a greater wage for what it is that you are doing. So that's how it's done. If you want to get out of poverty, then you, in that sense, then you have to learn how to do things that other people are not willing to learn how to do. That requires a lot of effort, skill, and you have to do those things. You have to learn that stuff, and then you have to compete with the people in that world, which will be fewer people. And when you are able to obtain work that you can do of that on that level, then you can earn a greater wage. So if you want to get out of poverty, that's what you do. You work for it. All right? That's how it's done. You have to work. And you have to do work, the kind of work that justifies that kind of a wage. And so if the poor want to escape their poverty, then that's the correct way, the appropriate way for that to be accomplished. And if you find someone who wants to learn how to do things and you want to give to them and support them so that they can have greater skills and be successful, it's really hard to find people who you can give to, who would do that, who would actually follow through over a long period of time and obtain those skills and then go and get their work. It's kind of tough to find people who will successfully do that. But that's how it's done. So if you want to help the poor in general, that's the way to do it. Otherwise, what you're doing is temporary, and that either gives them an opportunity to go on vacation or it gives them an opportunity to use their time wisely, and that just, of course, that depends on the person. All right? So I'm going to pause here. That's verse 8. Let me go on a little bit. I'll go on a little bit into verse 11. Now, a great many of the Jews knew that he was there, and they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus. All right, so here we have the situation where the chief priests, members of the Sanhedrin, they decided that they need to murder Lazarus also. So this probably could have been another conversation that Lazarus could be having with Jesus. Jesus, now since what you did, now they're going to come after me too. All right, what are we going to do there? they're going to have, and these leaders are going to have to be a little bit careful about how they handle this. They better kill Jesus first and then kill Lazarus. Otherwise, if they kill Lazarus first, you know what happened last time. Jesus might resurrect Lazarus from the dead again, and so they're going to have to be careful with how they do that. But what I would like to point out is that there were a lot of Jews, there were a lot of people who knew where Jesus was, all right? There were a lot of people who knew where he was, and they were going to go see him. So this was well known and well understood. For the sake of time, I'm going to pause here, and I will pick up again here in verse 9, 10, and 11, and move forward from there in the next message. This topic of knowing where Jesus is, and yet they still don't go get him. All right, they still don't go get him. It goes back to what I was mentioning earlier. Well, what happens if they do? Okay, what happens if they get him? All right, so what do they say? They say, we won. We did it. We got him. We got him. Yeah. All right. So now you got him. You win. Good for you. So what now? Right, what now? You're a thief. Okay. You took his life away from him. That's what you are. So that's what you win. Okay. Okay. And people like this, they generally don't think that far ahead. All they think about is, I just want to win. That's all. They don't think about, what are going to be the consequences if you do? What about that? And people just don't. People like this, they just don't think about what's going to happen if they succeed. Right? Okay, so I got a question for those of you who are using this for your small groups. If you were having dinner with Jesus, right? If you were having dinner with Jesus, what would you talk about and why? I thought this would be a good question. If you were having dinner with Jesus, and this was the last time you're going to have a conversation with him in this way, what would you talk about? And why? And why would you talk about that? All right, I think this is a good, fun question to think about. All right, let's pray. Dear God, thank you so much for this opportunity that we have had to be able to review what happened there at this gathering that you had with these friends of yours. And Lord, through this, I do pray that we will have a better understanding of what these things mean, about what it means to have a conversation with you, what it means to experience miracles in your life, and how we might respond to these things, and what it would mean for us to do things with our own lives, and how that would have an effect on our future and in the different ways that we might be able to participate with what you're doing. And I pray for this in Jesus' name. Amen.